So one thing we haven't done in a while is an FTP test, and seeing as we are coming to the end of the summer and we're going to now get into effectively what is winter training, I thought it would be a good time to throw one in because I have an easy week coming up after that, and then I'm going to do a 4-week training block. Before we dive into the FTP test itself though, I thought it'd be a little bit handy to look at the last 5 or 6 weeks to kind of see what changes I have made to my training, because my goal is to hit 4 watts per kg. First thing to consider is that I am now weighing 77 kgs on the nose. That's after a coffee and a little bit of morning business. So I need to hit 308 for an FTP ramp test. I'm going to do a Zwift FTP ramp test. I haven't got around to doing a 20-minute test. I don't know why. It's hard. I'm not sure if I've really kind of got the dedication to do that right now, but I promise you I will do one at some stage. So my goal is to hit that kind of 308 watts mark for a Zwift ramp test. I basically, on my previous test where I hit 303 watts, I finished the 400 watt minute, and then as soon as I got through the 420 gate, I died. So I basically need to be able to keep moving for a period of time. I'm not even sure how long, or for as long as possible, basically going into that 420 gate. And that's going to be like a really pivotal and interesting point, because that is what's going to move the needle and ultimately try and get me above the 4 watts per kg mark. It does help a little bit. I think I might have lost about a kg in weight since I last did my FTP test, but I don't think it's going to help too much. Right, the other thing is I thought it'd be interesting to show you, the last 5 or 6 weeks. So here we go. Here is a look at some of my training. You can see that I've kind of upped my volume a little bit, and my average miles per week is around about 200. I've also been working in a little bit of running over the last 5 or 6 weeks. You can see from the data that most days I am doing more than one thing. Some of the days where it looks like I've got 5 or 6 activities, a couple of those could be like a warm-up or something like that. But usually most days I will try and do basically 2 activity types, or 2 activities at least. So that could be 2 cycles or a run and a cycle. I very rarely kind of do 2 runs. But the intensity of the stuff that I have been doing has been quite high. The last 2 weeks, or the last week and a half, I have been working my way through an FTP builder training routine on Zwift. It's the 4-week FTP builder, and I basically pick the workouts that I want to do out of those because I'm trying to build more strength. So let's get stuck into the FTP test itself, guys. Here we go. Coming up, I need to hit 308 watts for it to be 4 watts per kg for my current body weight before we head into the winter. I'll see you guys on the bike.
Right guys, so we are on the bike and we've missed out the warm-up and then the first bunch of minutes, because obviously there's no point looking at those when they are the easy part of the test. So as mentioned, Zwift ramp test, so every minute the resistance goes up by 20 watts. We've started at 320. Now guys, I am going to cast your minds back to the first time I did a Zwift FTP test, a ramp test. I actually only made it through the 360 minutes. So as soon as it hit 380 watts, that gate there, the 380 watt gate, sorry, that's the one where I stopped. And then on my second test, I make it through the 400 watt gate. I last for the 400 watt minute, and then as soon as I hit the 420 watt gate, I tapped out. So this test, basically, for me to hit 4 watts per kg, I need to make it through the 420 watt gate and put as many seconds into that gate as possible. That's basically it. I did actually go back and have a look at my heart rate and things, especially relative to the first FTP test I did, which I think from memory was 272. I also think I did that a little bit fatigued, but anyway. So I did 272. The one thing I hugely noticed was my cadence. So if you look at my cadence now, we're in kind of 80 to 85 range, I think. I tend to ramp up a little bit the cadence as soon as we get into a new wattage, just to try and kind of build the speed and kind of make the change not quite so dramatic from a resistance point. But then I usually kind of settle back into 80 to 85 RPM on cadence for this test. But when I kind of circle back and look back, especially on my first test, I was over 95 revolutions per minute, RPM, on my cadence now. So I'm in the 360 gate. If I compare that to my first FTP test, I am just like trying to spin up and kind of really crank through the revolutions and keep my cadence high. So I think it is quite comforting to see that. Also, I will note that whilst my heart rate isn't too massively different, the one thing is that it's way more consistent now. So even though kind of relatively I tap out at 163, 164 on my first ever FTP test. So this point here that we've just got through is on my first ever FTP test. I was out. That was me done. 380 watts was too much. I couldn't keep turning my legs over. My heart rate was about the same, but I was easily kind of 10 to 15 revolutions per minute higher on my first FTP test. Now my second FTP test, which I think I did about 6 weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer, I made it through the 400 watt gate, and then I did the whole minute for 400 watts and tapped out as soon as I got to the 420 gate. But again, I think my cadence moves up a little bit. The key difference between all of them, or the other two that I've done and this one, is just my cadence is lower. My legs feel a little bit stronger. I'm not going to lie, this definitely felt harder, but for some reason, when I did my last two, when I did the last two, and I remember now, when I did the my 303 watts as an FTP test, which was my last one, and I made it through this gate that we're in now, this 400 watt gate. I was doing this gate and I was thinking, just hold on, try and make it to the 420 gate. This time I hit the 420 gate. I'm not going to say I feel good. I feel horrible. It's really, really hard. But the one difference, or the key difference, is basically I just feel like I knew as soon as I hit that 420 gate that I was going to be able to at least make it 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I just knew that I still had something in me that was going to let me keep the chain turning. So you look at it now, heart rate is really good, up at 170. That's basically kind of that real threshold for me. We're getting pretty close to kind of anaerobic, which will be interesting in a few months when hopefully I can do a bit more. But right, so here we go, guys. Let's pay attention, because we've gone through the 400 watt minute and we're now into the 420 minute. And you can see the pain that I am going through, but this is it. This is me doing stuff I've never done before. So I just have to work as hard as possible, head down, just keep the legs turning. I try and keep the cadence going and just turning in whatever way possible. You might notice that I don't get up into the 90s. I just don't think I had the ability to kind of turn it up into the 90s. But as soon as the cadence starts going below 80, it's just, there we go, here we go. Too much for me. So I last about 30 seconds and then keep going, and then it just dies. So 32 seconds into that 420 minute. And then that toasts me out. Just remember, guys, before I disappear, all I have to do is get 308 to be 4 watts per kg, and lo and behold, I hit, I think, 311. It'll come up in the screen in a second. So there we go. We've done it.
Right, guys, that is about it for this one. We have a new FTP on a Zwift ramp test, which is 311, and at my body weight, which is 77 kg, that puts me just a smidge over 4 watts per kg, which is basically the goal. So we're pretty happy with that. The one thing I am going to point out, which I think is the main difference, and I'll throw up a quick example now on the screen. If you look at my cadence, it never went over 95, never got up into the hundreds. And I kind of thought that once it got harder, I'd be able to spin up a little bit. But ultimately, what ended up happening was the wattage was too high for me then to generate enough speed to kind of spin up, if that makes sense. So obviously, I'm using erg mode on Zwift. So that is controlling the watts that I put out, and I basically have to pedal faster, and then it will manage my watt output and the resistance. But what I struggled to do once the watts got higher was just I couldn't spin up because I just didn't have it in my legs at that higher end, which I thought was really interesting, especially if you look at my first ever FTP test on screen now. You should see the cadence is really high at some wattages. I just couldn't do that this time. So everything was performed at around 80 to 90 RPM, I think was basically what it is. But really happy to get into 420 watts and hold that for what I felt like was almost 30 seconds because I was blacking out and my eyes were closed. But that definitely moved the needle enough for me to jump over that 4 watts per kg. There we go, guys. We're going to wrap it up there. That's the goal achieved for now anyway. I will do probably another ramp test towards the end of the year, because for me to make a difference now to my training, I think I really have to have a structured program in place. I got to work on my strength. I got to work on my everything, but I am going to get a little bit more specific. Up until now, it's just been cycling and cycling hard and Zwift races. Now we're going to do a ton of specific training routines and training programs that are in Zwift, and see whether that moves the needle. And we'll come back maybe 8, 9 weeks. See you guys soon.